And with us in the studio is the founder of the Geena Davis Institute on Gender in Media, Geena Davis. Welcome to Full Frame.
Thank you so much.
You know, it's great. Both of us are parents. We've had a chance to kind of talk about our kids.
Right.
Part of being a parent is inspiring your kids, and yet your daughter was inspiration for you to kind of start the Institute in a way.
That's correct, yes. So as an actress in Hollywood, I knew clearly there were fewer parts for women, but until my daughter was born and I started watching like G-rated movies and little kid stuff with her, I didn't realize that it was the same in children's media, that there are far fewer female characters than male. But once I started watching with her, I was like, what am I noticing here? And the only reason I got so deeply into this now is because I started mentioning it if I had meetings in Hollywood, you know, with a studio executive or somebody. I'd say, have you ever noticed how few female characters there are in G-rated movies? And to a person, they said, oh, no, that's not true anymore. No, that's been fixed. And I knew what I thought I was seeing, and I thought, you know what, maybe I need to get the data because clearly nobody seems to be noticing what I think I'm noticing. So that launched the whole thing. And
so there's this undoubtedly a sense of outrage, and then no one's listening. Right. So talk to me about the genesis. How does it get to that point to where we are today?
Right. So the first thing I did was raise a bunch of money to do the largest study of G-rated movies that had ever been done, and started taking meetings with Disney, you know, all the different studios, to present the results. And once, you know, I'm in the industry, they're very, please come talk about whatever you want to. Once they heard the numbers, they were appalled. They literally didn't have any idea that they were leaving out that many female characters. Like if I had said, there's not as many movies with a lead female character as a male character, they'd say, we know that. You know, it was kind of our hands are tied. But the fact that the worlds were bereft of female presence was something that had not stood out to them.
And then Disney movies, you grew up on them, I did as well. And let's face it, the script's almost the same. It's the princess, she's got to find a prince, then she lives happily ever after. I mean, we could write the scripts ourselves just sitting here. But now the film Frozen is kind of a different take on all of that. Do you think that perhaps this is a residual effect of what you're doing now?
Well, I'd like to claim credit for it. We've certainly visited Disney more than any other studio because they're very welcoming and open to this idea. You know, they're like, we want to do a great job. That's what they're famous for. My parents only let me watch Disney movies. So until I was 17, the only movies I saw were made by Disney because they felt they could trust the studio. So I know that there are films that have come out with a lot more female characters that we know we're directly responsible for. So I think things are changing. You know, the ratio of male to female characters in films has been exactly the same since 1946. Is that crazy?
I saw that statistic. I couldn't believe it.
Isn't that astounding?
And I'm sure that's what you were hearing from all your Hollywood friends. No, that can't possibly be true.
Yeah, no. And then, but that's the fact. So obviously the change is glacial as far as improving female characters, but I think that we're on the cusp of having the needle move for the first time, and you know, we're trying to really make that happen.
The needle needs to move, not just, and I want to focus mostly on Hollywood, but it needs to move in a lot of different ways. I remember it was last year, I think, in one of the newspapers I read that if Barbie was alive today, she'd walk around on all fours, that she'd only have a half a liver because she only had a 16-inch waist, that all of these things that are marketed, and then the young girls growing up are like, well, this is the ideal, this is the way I should look. And there's a sexual component to the films, too. I mean, they're objectified in many respects as well, too, correct?
Absolutely. There's a tremendous amount of hypersexualization in what kids see, which is astounding. Like in G-rated movies, the animated female characters wear the same amount of sexually revealing clothing as in R-rated movies. So what's that doing there at all, you know? And it's very prevalent that not only are there very few female characters, but they're very often serving the function of eye candy.
And then the other thing I think your research has pointed out that you know, when women are in films, they're not necessarily presidents of the United States or titans in industry.
Right.
That's another breakdown that you found as well.
It is. We did a very comprehensive study on the occupations of female characters in TV and movies, and found there's a horrible disparity there. There's some fields where there just aren't any female characters at all, represented, like in the upper levels of business and politics and that kind of thing. But of the characters who have jobs, 81% of them are male. So we're showing a very skewed world right from the beginning. And, and we have the problem in real life. There's far fewer women on boards and as CEOs and as law partners and those kinds of things, and in Congress. But we're not showing them on TV. On TV, you could immediately, or in the movies, you could say, well, let's just make half of the board female. We could do that, but it's not happening. It's
funny, you brought up Congress and you brought up Hollywood. So I did a little research. 1917, Jeanette Rankin became the first woman in Congress from the state of Montana. You would think Hollywood's a little bit more progressive than Montana, and I know there are probably people in Montana watching this. No offense against Montana. But what's interesting is I looked, 1980 was when Sherry Lansing finally became the first woman executive in Hollywood. Yeah. For almost more than 70 years, yeah. Hollywood took. How much of a difference would it make to have more women in roles like that, producers, directors, and you also found the disparity there as well, didn't you?
Right, absolutely. Yes, we found basically the ratio for women behind the camera is 5 to 1 if you look at director, producer, writer, cinematographer, editor, the top positions. So we also found that if there is a woman in one of those positions, the percentage of female characters on screen goes up. So we're not really getting the voices of women and the big picture when films are being created, because there aren't enough women involved in the process.
The Institute itself, a big piece of it is research. What's the overall effect? And I want to also kind of get your thoughts, because I know that you're involved in a really important study right now looking at
right.
globally
right.
how things break out.
Right.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, we have started the first global gender and media study looking at films in the most popular markets around the globe, because we want to know what are other countries doing. Maybe some regions are doing much better than us, and we'd like to find that out. I mean, we know that a great deal of the media consumed globally we make, so I mean, we're kind of responsible for, in large measure, to the image of women that's put around the world. But it would be fascinating to know. We'll know by this fall. We'll get the results and find out what are the percentages there, and if a region has more female characters in certain aspects, is that reflected in the population? Because my theory is, if we had plenty of female presidents and women in higher positions, it would change in real life. Well, actually, I know that they did a study after my president show went off the air. I had a very short administration, sadly, but they found that people who were familiar with the show were 68% more likely to vote for a female candidate for president. So it's clear that if you see it, you can be it, and that's why I wanted to change what kids see from the beginning.
Let me ask you this. I think it's interesting that your first film was Tootsie. Here's this great role for a woman played by a man. I mean, there's
right.
kind of an irony in all of that in a sense. But it was a good film in terms of talking about the stereotypes in that sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it was very interesting. And I read recently that Dustin said that was a very eye-opening experience for him to see how, to sort of feel how women are treated and objectified. And so that was interesting.
How do you persuade Hollywood executives to kind of turn the page? Because I know research is a big part of it, but you are going forward and saying, look, here's what we've got, you got to change. Yeah. Are they receptive?
They have been very receptive. I had no idea, once we had the research, what was the response going to be when I showed up at various studios. But it's been universally the same, where they're shocked and horrified, and they want to do better. Every meeting we have, somebody says, well, now I'm changing my project. I didn't realize, or one studio got out their whole book of upcoming movies and started going through it while we were sitting there. And so Hollywood's been very, very receptive to this idea.
Do you think, you know, we talked about things globally, but I know that your career, you've had the chance to really, as you said, play the baseball player. Thelma and Louise is described as one of the great woman movies there is, and I know that's had an impact. Women have come up and talked to you about that as well.
Yeah.
Why is that? Been fortuitous, or has it been like, look, I'm not doing this, I want to do something with meat?
It was quite a life-changing experience, actually, to be in Thelma and Louise because of the reaction of people, and especially women. But I'd been recognized here and there before, you know, oh, Beetlejuice or whatever, The Fly. But this was a totally different experience. If somebody recognized me from Thelma and Louise, they would, oh my God, I have to tell you what my reaction was and what my friend's reaction was, and this is how it affected me and changed me, and my friend and I acted out your trip. Really? So
Not all of it, I hope.
Not the whole thing. So that, what it made me realize was how few opportunities women have to feel like that about the female characters in a movie. So it really impacted my choices after that. Yeah.
Do you have a sense when you're making something like that, that, wow, this is groundbreaking?
No.
Or no?
We absolutely did not, which is probably good. You'd probably start feeling self-important or something if you knew what was. Nobody had a clue what would happen. It was a very low budget, and we knew it was a good script, and it's unusual because there's two female characters, but we had no idea the reaction it would get. It was pretty astounding.
So that film, playing a baseball player, being president of the United States, what roles are you proudest of? And were there some clunkers along the way that you were just like, now that you look at it from this prism that you're in now, you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that? Oh,
no, I love everything I did. I think actually those were my three favorite parts, to be in A League of Their Own and Thelma and Louise and Commander-in-Chief. Those were great. They were sort of iconic female characters, which was really fun. I always make a joke when I give speeches about this topic. I say, you know, I'm very serious about this, and I really know all the numbers. I was in a movie called Earth Girls Are Easy, yes, but that was very early, you know, but I love that movie too.
Your daughter loves playing soccer right now, but let's say she gets a little older and she says, Mom, I want to go in the family business, and she comes home with some of these scripts. What advice would you give her? Or what advice would you give any young woman who wants to go into the profession?
Well, it's really hard. I mean, if you're going to be extremely picky, it's impossible, especially if you're trying to establish a career, because most of the parts are going to be about how the character looks. And so, you know, what are you going to do? But the more status you can reach, the more you can impact things, I think. So that's tough. It's
a little steady pushing.
A little steady and gentle pushing. Like when I visit the studios, it's all very collegial, and I really don't have to say anything except I give the facts, and then they have their own reaction to it. I don't have to say, you need to do such and such. I'm just kind of like, hey, what do you think?
They're speaking to the President of the United States. You don't need to wag your
That's
finger.
right.
Geena Davis, what a delight. Thanks so much.
You.
Really appreciated it.
Thanks.